If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Coach, of course, the Ravens were scheduled to pick 29, but Eric DeCosta, Ozzie Newsome talked about it after the draft. They talked about it after that first night. It was that run, and they didn't mention it specifically, but you mentioned David Castro going to Pittsburgh. Dante Hightower comes off the board. Whitney Merciless, who they liked, and then Kevin Zeitler, the guard from Wisconsin. It was really a situation with 4 players in a row that, from everything you heard, the Ravens really liked. They were linked to them. As a coach, when you're sitting in that war room, is it tough when that happens, and even though you look at your board and say, all right, we have 5 or 6 different guys that we feel will be available if we trade back, is there still a stigma that when you trade out of the first round, there's that letdown, that disappointment?
It is, naturally, because you know you've fallen in love with this handful of players and you just get one. Now, they love Courtney Upshaw, and rightfully so. And for them to fall back and get him was a great move because they picked up value. But yeah, you're sitting there in the first round and you spend all this time with it and you recognize the value that could be. And you have them on the board for a specific reason. As a coach, you begin to fantasize about how they would fit in. And you hope one can fall there, particularly when you have a range of guys. And it doesn't, yeah, it's going to be disappointing. But then you got to look at the totality of, we got a pretty good guy. We picked up somebody else as well. So they got to feel good about it. But I mean, these draft picks are put in order for a reason. And when you don't get within that certain range, it's naturally going to be disappointing.
Now, you sat in that room 9 years for the draft. Can you remember a year where that just seemed to happen? I mean, every year the Ravens talk about they have roughly 150 players on their board, and it seems most years they end up getting the guys they want. But can you recall a year during your tenure where it just seemed like every single time you thought a guy was going to fall to you, you just missed him?
Yeah, there's always the case with that. We didn't fall back that much when I was there just because it turned out that way. And you know, you always talk about never leave the blue chip. I always got a kick out of wherever we were, the blue chips ran out the player before. But, you know, because no one say, oh, absolutely, this is the blue. Coach, boy, we're at 10, but yeah, it only goes to 9 this year. You know, oh, okay, well, that's too bad. Yeah, we still got some blue chip players. The one draft I do remember, our very first one, I think is very poignant in regards to the way the draft works. And again, it showed me early just how good Ozzie Newsome is. Early in our relationship, because we hadn't been together that long. Remember the first year, we had an early second-round pick, and we had a couple guys that we really liked. And again, as a coach, when you say, well, and Ozzie traded up. He traded the number 2 pick to Atlanta.
First, right.
And they ended up getting a tight end, and I'm thinking, and I was upset. It's like, look, man, we need players, okay? And well, I know the 2 equals, don't give me numbers, okay? This player I know we can do, you know, you had him on the board, I like him. Give me the names of who we're going to get instead, because the numbers do me no good. But those names in and around the area were Edwin Newell-Toller and Brandon Stoker. And Ozzie knew and had the board sized up that we could get that value. People got them both in the 4th, and yet we were able to trade the 2, which ended up being Jamal Lewis next year, because Atlanta thought they were going to be good again. They weren't. So we handled it beautifully, but as a coach, you can't help it. Draft value and the chart, that's all well and good. I need bodies. I need warm, living, breathing bodies to play this game. So, yeah, you have to play the game sometimes.
With the 2012 draft, this time last year, Vontaze Burfict would have been on everybody's top 35-ish. Some people said he was a slam dunk, off the edge, pass rushing machine. He'd be in the first round. How does a guy in 1 year go from that to not getting drafted?
Listening to all that talk, being surrounded by the wrong people, listening to the wrong people, becoming an idiot.
Is this what happened to him?
Exactly.
Okay.
Got too big for his britches, so to speak. He knew better. I'm sure it was hard to coach. Had some issues, in terms of testing, drug testing, and it cost him. Now he'll be motivated going in free agent. He's a talented, aggressive player, very undisciplined, and a perfect example of don't buy into the hype.
Can you remember a certain player over your tenure where the Ravens either A, removed the guy from the board, or B, moved him down and there was some serious caution flags there, but then wound up somewhere else and didn't have any issues?
Oh, absolutely. It's frustrating for him. We had a great medical staff, the best. But when the medical staff tells you, and there were some guys in this draft that have some medical issues, concussions, the receiver at Stanford was one, a couple guys that fell down, that you have to recognize that, and they tell you it's a degenerative knee or it's a disc or something. And okay, I buy that. And then you see someone else take him, and the guy plays for 5, 6, 7 years. Like, yeah, how's Miami sitting there feeling about passing on Drew Brees because those doctors said, no, we don't want to take a chance on that shoulder. But there's no doctor in front of my name. If they say that's the way it is, you got to go with it.
Brian, last thing, and then we'll sit down for a minute. Let you flash that ring a little bit more. When you, and we'll get into, I'm sure the rest of the guys will talk about the Ravens, but when you look at the way that they went about it this year, positionally, was there one area they didn't cover in your mind?
No, they're in that good position, like good teams are, the teams in the latter part of the draft, that you can take about anything that's going to fit. You don't have that absolutely, you'd like to come away with the offensive line built up, probably another receiver, they did that. Everybody talks about this being an older team. Obviously that's Ray Lewis and Ed Reed concentric to a degree. Ozzie, of course, has done a great job. This is good second-level youth in this team that's going to develop. And they're in a position where they didn't, and it's typical, that has always been Ozzie's philosophy. Don't let the offseason put you in a position where you take a player out of need in the draft, because need is a terrible evaluator. The offensive line, probably, of all things, some of the names you mentioned, whether it's Conch, whether it's Zeitler, DaCosta, to really fortify the interior offensive line. Not that they didn't. They took some interesting guys. And the Sosa Mealy, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. This guy's a monster.
He's a big boy.
It's going to look like that original offensive line, right? Wally Williams, Zeus,
right.
So they've addressed it in a smart way. But you'd like to have. There were some missed opportunities for them in the offensive line. I'm sure things could have fallen certainly.
Well, Luke's going to hang out, and I'm going to duck out of here and let you eat more of your wings. Brian Billick, everybody, we are Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air. And for the record, it's the mild sauce if you want to send Brian any wings for the holidays.
Getting old.
Maybe I said holidays, it's April. Never mind. All right, we'll be right back.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.